So by the end of today's session, you will be able to understand the Frank Starling law. Then we will discuss very important concept of preload and afterload of the heart. We have already discussed the cardiac output curve, and today we will learn the venous return curve, and we will compare the differences between the two curves. And then we will revisit the factors that regulate cardiac output and venous return. So these are the learning outcomes for today's session. So we will start with the Frank Starling's law. So as the name indicates, these two gentlemen uh, were responsible for the Frank Starling law of the heart. Otto Frank, the German scientist, and Ernest Starling, the British physiologist. And the Frank Starling law of the heart is named after these two gentlemen. So the simplest definition of Frank Starling law, so within the physiological limit, the force of contraction of heart is directly proportional to the initial length of muscle fibers before the onset of contraction. In other words, it means that the input is directly proportional to the output, where the input is the venous return and the output is the cardiac output. So greater the amount of venous return, greater will be the cardiac output, right? So when blood is received by the right atrium of the heart through the vena cava, so this amount of blood entering the right atrium will stretch the walls of the right atrium, the chamber of the right chamber of the heart, and this stretch will cause the cardiac muscle to contract. So greater the volume entering the heart, greater will be the stretch. Greater the stretch of the cardiac muscle, greater will be the pumping ability of the heart. So the volume going out of the heart will be greater as well. So I repeat, within the physiological limit, force of contraction of heart, the output, is directly proportional to the input. That is the initial length of muscle fiber before the onset of contraction, before the onset of contraction, before the filling. And these are the four mechanisms that explain the Frank Starling law. We have already discussed the definition. Force of contraction is directly proportional to the initial length, and there is a limit to it. So when the blood enters the right atrium of the heart, this increased amount of blood entering the right atrium will cause greater interaction between the thick and thin filaments of the heart, and this interaction will cause excessive stretch of the cardiac muscle, especially the right chamber of the heart. The greater the stretch, greater will be the force of contraction. Hence, more calcium ions will be released because calcium ions are responsible for contraction. Remember that greater the concentration of calcium ions, greater will be the contractility of the cardiac muscle. So more calcium ions will be released from the SR of the heart, from the sarcoplasmic reticulum of the heart, and the output will be greater as well. Increased amount of calcium ions will cause greater contractility, greater cardiac output. So this is Frank Starling law. So we have used two terminologies, preload and afterload, and these two are directly proportional to each other. When we use the term preload, we are referring to the venous return. So preload is the degree of tension on the cardiac muscle before the contraction, right? Before the cardiac muscle begins to contract, or you can say it is the stretching of the cardiac muscle fibers at the end of relaxation. So both definitions are correct. The tension on the muscle, cardiac muscle, that is before the contraction or at the end of diastole, right? And this preload of the heart is caused by the blood entering the right atrium during the filling phase, that is diastole. So the pressure caused by the blood entering the right atrium is responsible for preload. Greater the volume of blood entering the right atrium, greater will be the preload, and vice versa. So this blood entering the right atrium will cause stretching of the cardiac muscle fibers. Hence, more calcium ions will be released. These calcium ions will cause greater force of contraction, and this increased force of contractility will cause greater cardiac output. So we can conclude that the force of contraction of heart and cardiac output both are directly proportional to preload. If you increase the contractility, you are increasing the preload. If you increase the cardiac output, you are increasing the preload. Now, what is meant by the term afterload? It is the force against which the ventricles contract, the output of the heart. Preload is the input, the volume of blood received by the right atrium. Afterload is the output, the force against which the ventricles eject the blood. Or you can say afterload is the load against which the cardiac muscle exerts its contractile force. This means the afterload is determined by the arterial pressure. For example, the blood leaving the left ventricle will enter which vessel? The aorta. So if you increase the pressure inside the aorta, you are increasing the afterload for the left ventricle. Similarly, the blood leaving the right ventricle enters which vessel? Pulmonary artery. If you increase the pressure inside the pulmonary artery, you are increasing the afterload for the right ventricle. So we can conclude that force of contraction and cardiac output, both these parameters are inversely proportional to afterload. Unlike preload, which are directly proportional to these two parameters, there is an inverse relationship between afterload and force of contraction of heart. Similarly, inverse relationship between afterload and cardiac output. So description of the same thing, force of contraction of heart and cardiac output are directly proportional to preload. If you increase any of these two parameters, you are increasing the preload. Similarly, force of contraction of heart and cardiac output are inversely proportional to afterload. If you increase the afterload, you are compromising the cardiac output. Not only cardiac output, the force of contraction. Remember, these two are not standard formula. This is for the sake of explanation. So you must remember the relationship between cardiac output and force of contraction with preload and afterload. Direct relationship with preload and inverse relationship with afterload. So suppose this is the heart, this is the right side of the heart, And here you can see the left side of the heart. And these are the four chambers: the right atrium, the right ventricle, the left atrium, and the left ventricle. And this is the receiving end of the heart, the right atrium. And blood enters the right atrium through the vena cava. Here you can see the direction of the arrow indicates the blood entering from the peripheral areas into the right atrium. This is the preload. This is the preload. And from the left ventricle, blood will exit into the aorta. Here you can see the blood will leave the left ventricle into the aorta. Similarly, blood will leave the right ventricle into the lungs via pulmonary artery. So you all know this anatomy. The idea is, the concept of afterload is to understand the pressure in these two vessels, the pressure inside the aorta and the pressure inside the pulmonary artery. The left ventricle has to eject blood against the pressure inside the aorta. Similarly, the right ventricle has to eject blood against the pressure inside the pulmonary artery. This means the pressure inside the aorta is the afterload for the left ventricle. Similarly, the pressure inside the pulmonary artery is the afterload for the right ventricle. So if you increase the pressure inside the aorta, you are increasing the afterload for left ventricle. Similarly, if you increase the pressure inside the pulmonary artery, you are increasing the afterload for the right ventricle. So there is a direct relationship between preload and afterload. If you increase the preload, obviously the afterload will increase. The greater the amount of venous return, the greater the amount of cardiac output. So we have discussed what is meant by the term cardiac output, the volume or the amount of blood pumped by the heart in 1 minute. This is cardiac output. So you must differentiate cardiac output from stroke volume. One of the factors which determine cardiac output is stroke volume. Stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped by the heart in one stroke, in one beat. So these two are different parameters. So what factors determine cardiac output? The first factor and the most important one is the venous return itself. The amount of blood entering from the peripheral vessels into the right atrium. And this is the same amount, 5 liters per minute. This is the same amount as that of cardiac output. So all the factors that determine venous return will eventually affect cardiac output as well. So direct relationship is there between venous return and cardiac output. Similarly, direct relationship is there between force of contraction of heart and cardiac output. Increased contractility will lead to increase in cardiac output as well. Similarly, heart rate and cardiac output, they show direct relationship. So these three factors, they are directly proportional to the cardiac output. The fourth factor is the total peripheral resistance. We have discussed already the resistance in the peripheral vessels is commonly known as TPR. And if you increase the resistance in the peripheral vessels, you are compromising the blood flow. This will reduce the blood entering the right atrium, that is venous return. Decrease in venous return will cause decrease in cardiac output as well. That is why there is an inverse relationship between TPR and cardiac output. And the factors that affect venous return include respiratory pump. We have discussed respiratory pump already. So what happens during inspiration? Movement of diaphragm causes compression of the abdominal veins and blood is pumped into the right atrium. Hence, the venous return is increased. Moreover, there is change in the intrapleural pressure due to expansion of the thorax. So, there is direct relationship. Similarly, the soleus muscle, when it contracts, it pumps the blood into the right atrium towards the heart. You can see during the relaxation phase, the proximal valve is closed. When the muscle contracts, the soleus muscle, this proximal valve opens and blood is pumped from the peripheral area into the right atrium. So during contraction of the soleus muscle, the venous return increases. The other factors include gravity. Gravity has an inverse relationship with venous return because during standing position, the blood is supposed to move against the gravity into the right atrium. So inverse relationship is there. And then another factor is blood volume. If you increase the blood volume, you are increasing the venous return and vice versa. Similarly, venous pressure or the pressure gradient is also important. Greater the gradient, greater will be the venous return because the pressure inside the small venules is much higher than that in the larger veins. Similarly, the pressure inside the great vena cava is much lower than that. So venous pressure also affect venous return. Then sympathetic stimulation is responsible for the partial state of contraction of the vessels and we call it as the vasomotor tone. So sympathetic stimulation will increase the vasomotor tone, hence it will promote venous return. Then there is an inverse relationship between venous return and the pressure inside the right atrium. If you increase the pressure inside the right atrium where the blood is supposed to enter, obviously you will compromise the venous return. So inverse relationship is there between right atrial pressure and venous return. Then we will discuss another term, MSFP, mean systemic filling pressure. So mean systemic filling pressure is the pressure inside the systemic circulation when the blood flow is stopped. And MSFP is dependent on the blood volume. Remember that. If you increase the blood volume, you will increase MSFP and vice versa. So increasing the blood volume will increase MSFP, hence venous return will be increased. Then there is inverse relationship between resistance and venous return. The greater the resistance to blood flow, the venous return will be less. Pumping action of heart also directly affects venous return. Venous compliance or capacitance also affect venous return. So sympathetic stimulation, what does sympathetic stimulation do? It will cause increase in the vasomotor tone. How vasomotor tone is increased? By decreasing the compliance. By compliance we mean distensibility, that is change in volume per change in pressure. So sympathetic stimulation will cause a decrease in venous compliance, hence it will cause vasomotor tone and venous return will be promoted. So decreased venous compliance causes increase in venous return. Similarly, if you increase the pressure inside the vena cava, you will compromise the venous return. So this is the depiction of the same factors that we have discussed direct relationship between blood volume and venous return, direct relationship between skeletal muscle pump, direct relationship between the pressure gradient. Similarly, sympathetic stimulation will increase the vasomotor tone by increasing the venous pressure and decreasing the compliance or the venous capacity. So have a look at this. We have discussed all these factors. So cardiac output is sometimes denoted as stroke volume multiplied by heart rate. This means these two parameters, they directly affect cardiac output. Stroke volume is the volume pumped by the heart in one beat, which is equal to 70 ml, and heart rate normal is 72. So if you multiply 72 with 70, it will give you around 5000 milliliters or 5 liters per minute. And we all know stroke volume can be calculated by subtracting end diastolic volume from end systolic volume. So end diastolic volume is around 120 ml and systolic volume is around 50 ml. So this will give you approximate 70 ml of stroke volume. And if you divide stroke volume with end diastolic volume, this will give you the ejection fraction. So 70 ml divided by 120 ml, and the fraction will be around 55%. Normal ejection fraction will be around 55%. So we have discussed the cardiac output curve already. Now let's talk about the venous return curve or the vascular function curve. So you can see the right atrial pressure on the x-axis and the blood entering the right atrium, that is the venous return, on the y-axis. So we will measure the right atrial pressure in millimeters of mercury. So you can see if we start from 0 millimeters of mercury, which is the normal right atrium pressure, increase in the right atrial pressure will cause progressive decrease in venous return. So as you can see the downward slope, this downward slope indicates inverse relationship between venous return and right atrial pressure. As you increase the right atrial pressure, the venous return drops from 5 to 0, and approximately at 7 millimeters of mercury, the venous return is almost 0. So the pressure at which the venous return drops to 0 is the mean systemic filling pressure. So this is equal to 7 millimeters of mercury. So the pressure at which the venous return is 0, or you can say this is the pressure at which there is no blood flow, when the blood flow is stopped. So when the venous return is 0, obviously the blood flow will stop, and the normal value will be around plus 7 millimeters of mercury. So inverse relationship is there between right atrial pressure and venous return. Increase in right atrial pressure will cause progressive decrease in venous return. If we go on the opposite side, if we decrease the right atrial pressure beyond 0, you can see the normal right atrial pressure of 0 will give you venous return of 5 liters per minute. Now, if you decrease the right atrial pressure beyond 0, you can see the plateau phase. So no change in the right atrial pressure. So there's a transitional zone which is around -2 millimeters of mercury. Beyond -2 millimeters, there is a plateau phase. And why there is a plateau phase? Because if you decrease the pressure inside the right atrium beyond 0, this negative right atrial pressure will cause collapse of the large veins, right? So right atrial pressure when goes beyond zero, that is below the atmospheric pressure, this will not significantly alter the right atrial pressure. This is due to collapse of the large vein. So negative pressure is created in the right atrium, and this negative pressure sucks the walls of the veins, and there is a plateau phase. Now in this figure, we have added both the curves. The red curve is the cardiac output curve. We have discussed the cardiac output curve, and the blue curve is the venous return curve. You can see the normal cardiac output is approximately equal to 5 liters per minute, and same is the value for the venous return. And this 5 liters per minute is there when the pressure inside the right atrium is normal, and the normal right atrial pressure is around 0 millimeters of mercury. So if you trace this equilibrium point, 5 liters per minute venous return and cardiac output at 0 millimeter right atrial pressure. So this is the equilibrium point, and this blue curve is the venous return curve. You can see inverse relationship between right atrial pressure and venous return. Increase in the right atrial pressure. If you increase the right atrial pressure from 0 to 4, you can see progressive decrease in venous return from 5, and it comes close to 0 liters per minute at the pressure of 7 millimeters of mercury. And the pressure at which the venous return is 0 and there is no blood flow is the MSFP, mean systemic filling pressure. And MSFP is dependent on blood volume. There is a direct relationship between blood volume and mean systemic filling pressure. So increase in blood volume will increase the MSFP, and obviously then venous return will be increased. For example, if we transfuse blood, 20% of blood, we are going to increase the MSFP. So here this dashed or dotted line is after transfusion. After transfusion, 20% transfusion of normal. So you can see a rapid increase in MSFP from 7 to 16. Yeah, you can see. So direct relationship between blood volume and MSFP. So after transfusion, the MSFP is increased from 7 to 16 millimeters of mercury. Hence, the equilibrium point is raised as well. So now at the new equilibrium point, the cardiac output is almost more than twice the normal. So this cardiac output is now around 12 liters per minute. It has raised from 5 to 12 due to increase in the MSFP and increase in the blood volume. Now this is the last slide for today's session. You can see multiple curves in different colors. Just focus on the normal cardiac output curve in red. Can you trace the normal cardiac output curve in red? Here you can see this is the normal cardiac output curve. Similarly, this red curve is the normal venous return curve, and this is the equilibrium point point A. So the normal cardiac output is around 5 liters per minute at the pressure of 0 millimeters in the right atrium, and same is the amount for venous atrium. This is the equilibrium point. Now what we have done is we have stimulated the heart by sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. So if you stimulate the heart with sympathetic nerve fibers, you are going to increase the cardiac activity. Remember, sympathetic stimulation increases all the cardiac activities. It increases the force of contraction of heart. It increases the cardiac output. Similarly, if you inhibit the sympathetic supply, this will give you an opposite response. So this green dotted line indicates the response of the cardiac activity after stimulating the heart with sympathetic supply. So after maximum sympathetic stimulation, you can see the change in the equilibrium point. The cardiac output curve is raised, the venous return curve is raised as well here. So now the cardiac output is way beyond its normal level. From 5, it is almost up to 10 liters per minute. So the equilibrium point has been raised after stimulating the heart with sympathetic supply. Not only cardiac output has been raised, you can observe the rise in the MSFP as well. We have discussed that the MSFP is around 7 in normal cardiac muscle. Here you can see. So after stimulating the heart with sympathetic division, the MSFP has been raised from 7 to almost 17 millimeters per. This means if you stimulate the heart with sympathetic nerve fibers, this will increase all the cardiac activities. This will increase the cardiac output. This will increase the force of contraction of the heart. This will increase the venous return of the heart, and this will also increase the MSFP. Similarly, if you anesthetize the heart by spinal anesthesia, this black dotted curve indicates the cardiac output curve after spinal anesthesia. Here, can you trace the cardiac output curve? Here, this is the cardiac output curve after spinal anesthesia. Similarly, this is the venous return curve after giving anesthesia. Now you have anesthetized the heart. This will cause a drop in the equilibrium point. So the new equilibrium point is point B. So you can see a drop in the equilibrium point from A to B. This means the cardiac output has been dropped, the venous return is decreased. Moreover, you can observe a decrease in the MSFP as well. So the MSFP, which was around 7 millimeters of mercury initially in normal heart, it has dropped from 7 to 4 millimeters. So to conclude, sympathetic stimulation causes increase in cardiac output, increase in venous return, and increase in MSFP. If you inhibit sympathetic supply by giving anesthesia, this will decrease the cardiac output, decrease the force of contraction, decrease the venous return, and eventually decrease the MSFP as well. So this is all for today's session. If you have any questions, please let me know. Ji Nadine, question answer session.
Okay.
ठीक है जी। मेंबरशिप सेंड करनी चाहिए।
The students, if you have any questions, please tell your name and then ask. I'm not going to repeat or revise all the slides. If you have any query, please identify the query and then ask the relevant question. Repetition will not good. Can you hear me? So one of the students have asked the concept of preload and afterload. Preload is the input, afterload is the output of the heart. Afterload is the load against which the heart has to eject blood. That is the pressure inside the vessels. The pressure inside the aorta is the afterload for the left ventricle, because the left ventricle is supposed to eject blood into the aorta. Similarly, the right ventricle is supposed to eject blood. If the pressure inside the aorta, this will compromise the pumping ability of the left ventricle. Hence, the afterload for the left ventricle will increase. Now the left ventricle has to contract with greater force to eject the blood into the aorta. Similarly, if you increase the pressure inside the pulmonary artery, you are increasing the afterload for the right ventricle, because the right ventricle is supposed to eject blood into the pulmonary artery for lungs. So increase in the pressure inside the pulmonary artery will cause increase in the afterload for right ventricle. So this is afterload. The blood entering the right atrium through the vena cava is the preload. So according to Frank Starling law, within the physiological limit, preload is directly proportional to the afterload, that is the initial length of muscle fiber before the onset of contraction. So within a certain limit, force of contraction of heart is directly proportional to the initial length of muscle fiber. This initial length of the muscle fiber before the onset of contraction, this is the preload. Before the contraction or after the diastole phase, at the end of relaxation phase. So this initial length of muscle fiber before the cardiac muscle begins to contract is the preload, and this preload is directly proportional to the force of contraction of the heart. This is the Frank Starling law. So in simple words, the greater the volume of blood entering the heart, the greater will be the pumping ability of the heart. Any other question? Remember, these topics are very important for examination point of view. And this is the last lecture for cardiac output and venous return. Please ask any question, any query if you have. जी नदीम स्टूडेंट्स अनम्यूट है, अनम्यूट किया हुआ है. कनेक्शन खत्म हो गया. Yes, students, please. Any questions? We are waiting for any question. If you are listening, if you're trying to understand, there must be some questions in your mind. So for your MCQs, you must know some normal values. For example, the normal value of cardiac output in adult males is around 5 liters. Remember, this value may vary from adult males to females. The cardiac output value in females is slightly less, around 4.6 liters per minute or 4.9 or 4.8 liters per minute. So the average value is around 5 in healthy adult males in liters per minute. And the normal value for stroke volume is 70 milliliters. Remember, there is difference between stroke volume and cardiac output. Although stroke volume is one of the factors that determine cardiac output, the simplest definition of stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped by the heart in one stroke, in one beat. So approximately 70 ml is pumped by the heart in one stroke. And if you multiply the stroke volume with heart rate, that is around 72. So this will give you cardiac output of 5000 milliliters. And this 5000 milliliters will be equal to 5 liters per minute. So you must memorize these values. Similarly, uh, you must know the normal values of end diastolic volume. Stroke volume is the difference between end diastolic and end systolic volume. The approximate value of end diastolic volume is around 120 milliliters, from 110 to 120, and end systolic is around 40 to 50 or sometimes 60 milliliters. So if you subtract end diastolic from end systolic, this will give you stroke volume of approximately 70 ml. Similarly, subtracting, sorry, dividing stroke volume with end diastolic volume, this will give you ejection fraction. Stroke volume is approximately 70. If you divide 70 ml with 120 ml and you take a fraction, ejection fraction has no units. This is a fraction. So we express ejection fraction in percentage form, right? So you calculate the percentage, it comes out approximately uh, equal to 55%. So now this ejection fraction depicts the pumping ability of the left ventricle. So when you see echocardiography report, there is ejection fraction mentioned on the report, and this depicts the pumping ability of the left ventricle mainly. So if the fraction is around 50 to 55%, this is normal. So you must memorize the values, and remember all these values are in adult males. The values may vary in uh, both the genders. Similarly, there is variation in age group as well. Remember, the cardiac output of an infant will be different from that of an adult. So, no question today. We still have few minutes. If you are hesitant to ask, you can text your question in chat. That's the easiest way to ask question. So in this chapter, cardiac output and venous return, the definitions are very important. The definitions of cardiac output, the definition of venous return, the definition of stroke volume, definition of end-diastolic volume, end-systolic volume, ejection fraction. So these definitions are important. Plus, the factors that affect cardiac output, the factors that affect venous return, these factors are very important, especially the cardiac output curve and venous return curve. For BDS students, you must understand the at least the two curves, the cardiac output curve, the normal cardiac output curve, the normal venous return curve. You're not supposed to learn all the graphs mentioned in your book. At least cover the effect of sympathetic and parasympathetic stimulation. This curve is important for you people. What is the effect of sympathetic stimulation? What is the effect of sympathetic inhibition or parasympathetic stimulation? So this curve is very important for you people. I intentionally left the last 5 to 10 minutes for the question answer session. If you have no questions, please let me know. All right. So in venous return curve, we have discussed the inverse relationship between the right atrial pressure and venous return. This is the normal right atrial pressure, 0. So at 0 millimeters of mercury, the venous return is around 5 liters. This is normal. Now what happens if you increase the pressure from 0 to plus 4? You can see this downward slope. So as you increase the pressure inside the right atrium, you are compromising the venous return. Why there is decrease in venous return? Because the blood is supposed to enter the right atrium through the peripheral vessels. If the pressure inside the right atrium is already increased, is already on the higher side, obviously the blood entering the right atrium will be compromised. Hence there is inverse relationship between right atrial pressure and venous return. So normal right atrial pressure is around 0 and the venous return is 5 liters per minute. So if you keep on increasing the right atrial pressure till the point the venous return drops to 0 here, this is the mean systemic filling pressure. The pressure inside the systemic vessels when the blood flow is stopped is called the MSFP or the mean systemic filling pressure. And this MSFP is dependent on blood volume. If you increase the blood volume, you will increase the MSFP. On the opposite side of the venous return curve, you can see there is a transitional zone. If you decrease the right atrial pressure beyond 0 at around -2 here, you can see the transitional zone at around -2. So after this transitional zone, there is a plateau phase. So further decrease in the right atrial pressure will not alter the venous return significantly. And why is this plateau phase? Because of the negative pressure created inside the right atrium. And this negative pressure will suck the blood against the walls of the veins. So this will cause the collapse of the large veins. When the veins are collapsed, there will be no change in the venous return, right? So negative pressure inside the right atrium will cause collapse of the large veins, the vena cava, and there will be no significant change in the venous return amount. That is why we observe a plateau phase if you decrease the right atrial pressure beyond 0 in the negative side. Any other question? So we still have 1 minute. If there is any query, we can quickly cover any query. So relationship between force of contraction of heart and cardiac output with preload and afterload. We have discussed this quite a few times that the pressure inside the aorta is the pressure against which the left ventricle has to eject blood. And this is the pressure against the pumping ability of the left ventricle, and this is the afterload of the left ventricle. Similarly, the pressure inside the pulmonary artery is the afterload for the right ventricle, because the right ventricle is supposed to pump or eject blood into the pulmonary artery. So if you increase the pressure either in the aorta or in the pulmonary artery, you are compromising the pumping ability, you are compromising the force of contraction, you are compromising the cardiac output. If you increase the pressure inside the pulmonary artery, you are compromising the pumping ability or the force of contraction of the right ventricle. So an inverse relationship is there between force of contraction of heart and cardiac output with the afterload. But there is a direct relationship between these two parameters with the preload, right? So if you increase the preload, you are increasing the cardiac output. Preload is the venous return. If you increase the venous return, the contractility will increase, the cardiac output will increase. So there is a direct relationship between preload and these two parameters, and an inverse relationship between afterload and cardiac output. Yeah, I know time is off. Okay, thank you. Allah Hafiz.